Hi everyone, it's Beth and welcome to the weekend. So I must apologise because I think in terms of Facebook Lives on my page, this actually might be the first one of the year. Or certainly the first formal one, as in one of my scheduled lives. If you recall, before Christmas I was quite regimented and always making sure that I was doing my lives at 8 o'clock on Thursday, and that's something that I said I would continue to do. And there's been, I'm not going to say excuses or reasons, but reasons why it's just not been even appropriate to do some of my lives on a Thursday. And I know that sounds really maybe dramatic, but there have been a number of things that have been happening in family life and in community life, you know, in terms of what's been happening in my own hometown. And it's felt almost disrespectful or inappropriate to be jumping on Facebook and talking about work, if I'm honest. One thing I really want to ensure that I do when I communicate on Facebook is to be authentic. And I know it's a word that's often overused, but I'm just really keen to pitch up at the right times and to share my thoughts at the right times. And that also includes knowing when it isn't appropriate to do that. There's been literally a catalogue of things for the last few Thursdays when I would ordinarily do these lives where it just hasn't been the right time. And last night, so the reason I didn't do a Facebook Live last night was that I was at an award ceremony, so that was really cool. So I was really pleased to go to, it was a medical technology awards. For the West Midlands region, and I was there with a couple of the businesses that I get to mentor, which was great. And there were a number of, well, actually, certainly one of the companies I support was an award winner. It was a gold award winner. I've just made that up. It wasn't so much gold. So yeah, they won an award, and there was another award won by a company, a young company, and one of the co-founders was actually somebody I worked with, must be about 5 years ago when I was in the NHS, and he was a student at the time, so that was really great to see how his businesses thrived over recent years, and there he was sort of winning an award. So that was good. So that was last night, hence why jumping on and speaking to you tonight. And the reason I've chosen tonight's topic has been triggered by a couple of conversations over the last probably 3 or 4 days. So one thing I've been doing, whether you're aware or not, I've been actually writing a blog, just a short blog on a daily basis since the new year. And there are a few themes that continue to emerge, and there's no great surprise in that, because what I talk about in my blog are things that I'm passionate about. You know, I talk about creating options, I talk about collaboration, I talk about community. And there's one topic that I've gone back to on 2 occasions already, and I'm inspired to write a third, but I thought I'd actually share this in the Facebook Live. And that topic was about doing things our own way. And yes, it applies in business, and it's a business context I'm going to be talking about today. But isn't that actually about, you know, a big thing for us to remember in life as well? How there are no rules, really. Okay, there's some rules in terms of what's legal and what's not, but we only get, you know, this one life, and we really get an opportunity to do things our way, to do things in a way that when we look back over the previous year, previous month, previous day, we can be confident that we've done something the way that we have chosen to do it, as opposed to feel that the world is doing stuff to us and we are just being pulled along and being very passive in that activity. So I wanted to share a little bit about that realisation that I had when somebody said it's okay to do it your way. and I was actually at a conference, and I should really check the date because it was one of those real milestone occasions. And I was at a conference, and the speaker came onto stage. She was in her, I would guess, about 60s. She was a tall, elegant lady carrying what I can only describe at that time as sort of like a bit of a granny handbag. Not with a big shoulder strap, you know, but was physically carrying on her little handbag, and popped that on the podium. And she's not a person I'd come across before. And it transpired this was Eliza Manningham-Bower, and she used to be head of the MI5. So pretty amazing woman in terms of what she'd achieved. And it was one of those talks that created a massive shift in the way that I think about this particular topic. So it was a time when I was doing a senior management role, and the reason that this story sort of resonated with me, people often say to you when you're in a senior management role, particularly in a large organisation, you know, would you ever like to do your boss's job? And at that time, I'm absolutely convinced I would have said, no, I could never do his job. You know, he's done X, Y, Z in his life. I could never do that. And there would have been lots of reasons why I would have perceived I could never do his job. But the story that Eliza Manningham-Bower told was very inspirational. So she described how she'd been in a very similar situation. She was doing the deputy job, and people had said to her, look, the boss is retiring soon. Are you going to do? Are you going to go for the head job? Are you going to do the head of the MI5 job? And she was like, no way. There's absolutely no way that I can do this role. And she had all of the same internal dialogue that I'd had previously, talking about, you know, why she couldn't do the role, what her current boss was doing, which would mean that she would never be able to do it the same way. You know, all of that sort of internal dialogue that we have. We've probably come across these sorts of things in our life in many times, even as a parent, perhaps. You know, you reflect on the way that your parents have brought you up, brought your siblings up, and you think, oh my gosh, I could never do that. You know, I'm one of 5. How on earth did my parents bring up 5 kids? I've got 1 child, and I still, you know, think I'm bimbling on. And you know, we have these milestones where we look at people and you think, oh, I could never do that. There's no way I could do that job. And Eliza, I think she's a dame, so it doesn't feel right calling her Eliza, but Dame Eliza was telling the story about then how she sort of just continued to do her deputy role. And there was a pivotal moment. There was a moment post 9/11 in New York when she was literally in a helicopter flying over Ground Zero. And that moment she felt massively passionate about what she did with regards to UK security. And the way she tells the story is the penny dropped in that moment, and she thought, you know what? I know the outcome that I need to achieve as head of MI5, and I can achieve that outcome by doing it my way. I won't do the role the way my current boss does it, but I will be able to do it my way. And she had great confidence in her ability in that moment, and was able to just create that mind shift. Hi, Helen. Create that mind shift where she knew she was absolutely able to do that role, but she was going to do it her way. And so she left New York, left in the helicopter, you know, went back to the UK, and she became head of MI5. And that had a massive influence on me, her telling that story, because there have been lots and lots of occasions, including when I actually left my previous employment, I set up my business myself, when I've doubted my ability. I've looked at people around me, I've looked at other business owners, I've looked at other people that you know, I might be working with on projects, and, you know, whether you call it imposter syndrome or whether you just have that knock of confidence sometimes, I've often thought, oh my goodness, you know, you feel a bit overwhelmed, and you think, I could never do their job, or I could never achieve what they achieve. But the reality is, as long as you're very clear on the outcome that you or the role needs to achieve, yes, you can do it. If people are recommending that you go for these roles, that you do these things, they know that you have the abilities to do it. It's just about doing it your way, and it's about finding your way of doing things. And I've always had, you know, I feel very fortunate. I think this is something that came even from my childhood. I've always had a sort of a can-do attitude. I've always had a, if I want something badly enough, I can achieve it. But it didn't mean that I didn't have all of that self-doubt. And, you know, when it's something that you really want to do, but just reframing it and thinking, yes, you can do it, but you will do it your way is very important. And so my first blog on this topic was very much about that, going back probably a couple of weeks. And then about a week later, I did a bit of a reflection. And what I'd realised is I'm very good at saying these things sometimes, but we don't always listen to what we're saying ourselves. We don't always take our own advice. And what happened in that week, I realised I've been sort of consuming lots of information, lots of advice. I've been going on courses, I've been at workshops, and I'll talk about a couple I went to this week later. But I think it's very easy sometimes, although I'm saying, remember, just do these things your way, it's quite easy to get drawn into other people's way of doing things. And this gets manifested in lots of ways. I mean, for those of you that are on LinkedIn, you must see this. Irrelevant of whether it's a congruent thing to do, how many of us are being sold to on LinkedIn? And I don't genuinely believe that the people that are trying to be really clumsy on LinkedIn, you know, they ask to connect with you, and the next thing you do, you get a direct message with a big sales pitch. I don't think they're trying to be clumsy. I think, or not consciously trying to be clumsy. I'm not sure anyone consciously tries to be clumsy. They're not consciously working that way. What they're doing is following somebody else's formula. There are so many tips and tricks and things out there. Some of it's awesome, so, you know, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, and some of it less so. And just because it's worked for somebody else, it doesn't necessarily it's going to mean it works for us. So I'm always a little bit cautious to follow some instructions literally to the letter. I mean, some courses, they give people, you know, LinkedIn direct message templates, and whilst it maybe have worked for one business, it's not necessarily going to work for your business. And I don't think necessarily people are taking the time to engage their brain and think, is this a way that I want to come across to a potential new contact, new client? And there's just a real, it just feels very messy. I think that's probably the way I can describe it. It just feels very messy. I think there's lots of people selling, oh, this is the way to do something. And there's lots of people following without maybe engaging their brain and thinking about whether it's possible to take the learning but still do it their way. So those are the two blogs that I shared. And the second one I'd shared about that realisation that there's lots of information out there, but we need to find our own way, was really reinforced in two interactions I've had this week. So the first I want to share is I've been chatting to an entrepreneur, and he's an entrepreneur in every sense of the word, you know, word, in that he's running a number of businesses, he's getting out there, he's doing it. And what I thought was a shame, or what came maybe as a bit of an alarm bell in my mind, is as he was sharing about his journey, he was using language like, well, of course, everything I do is very different. I approach life having to learn on the job. There's nobody I can learn from. And there's no other way of doing it. You know, he sort of describes the fact that his world is full of activity that could fill maybe 3 lifetimes. And the work he is doing is massively, massively valuable. And what struck me is and I said to him, I know that whilst your business itself could be very unique in terms of what you sell and what you do and who you connect with, but there are so many people out there that you can learn from. And that's the dynamic between doing it your own way or doing it alone. And I really don't think that people need to do many things alone, even if you feel that it's appropriate for you to plough your own path, as I would say many of us probably are, and certainly in the Facebook group that I run, we're going along an untrodden path, but the challenges that we face each step of the way, I can absolutely guarantee somebody else would have faced that challenge. Okay, the direction, the end point might be slightly different, but the little challenges that we face along the way, somebody else in another walk of life will have experienced it. So the trick is being able to learn from that experience, to learn from what other people have done to maybe overcome that challenge, but still remember it's okay to do it your own way. So it might be that a particular challenge lends itself to you speaking to a marketing expert, or you need to speak to somebody that's very hot on accounting, or you need some hand-holding through how best to create a new business model, or you need to even get some advice on where people that could relate to you or you could relate to hang out. I mean, one of the conversations I've been having recently, and it sort of surprised me this day and age, there are still a lot of people that are on no social media at all, and including those that run businesses. And just being able to talk through with somebody where they can access some resources to help with their current challenges has been quite enlightening for some of those people. And so I think it's fine as a business owner, entrepreneur, or somebody, working in whichever walk of life, to be bold in saying nobody is doing this role anywhere else, and fine, nobody may be doing that role anywhere in the world, but I genuinely think the individual challenges that we face, other people are facing. So it's how do we access that? And if for no other reason, and this is what I said to somebody this week, if for no other reason, just to be able to speak to other people, have a soundboard to offload, or to share new ideas. I mean, I've spent numerous hours over the last fortnight, not quite sanity checking my thoughts, but sharing my thoughts with other like-minded people, so that we can maybe go down a route or maybe I can explore something uncharted, but in a better informed position, because I've been talking to these other people. I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense, but hopefully you're getting what I mean. So it can be a very lonely place. I think it can be a very lonely place in when you're employed. I think it can be a very lonely place when you're running your own business, if you feel that you're the only person that has ever experienced that challenge. And so the more that we can do to try and access people who are experiencing or similar things to us, the better. I mean, this was my incentive for starting my We See You Business Founders Group, or Founders Club we call it, because a number of us are on the same journey, and irrelevant of what our business is, and there's a real mixed bag of businesses in there, lots of different sectors, lots of different stages, just to have a group of people where you can say, can somebody help? Has somebody experienced this challenge before? I've got an opportunity, I'd like to share it with somebody else. I think that's hugely powerful, and the good thing about Facebook, and it's a shame really this isn't working in other places that are maybe more business orientated like LinkedIn, if there's a challenge or a need from people in the group and people are prepared to share it, it's so easy just to invite other people in. This isn't about us necessarily solving our own problems with the resources that are already there, but we can bring people in. We can say, look, have you ever experienced this in your business? And then we start to appreciate that we aren't alone. But coming back to that caveat that I shared earlier, still remembering through all of this that whatever people share with us, we're under no obligation to take that advice to the letter. What we need to remember, it's okay to take that piece of advice and then to see how that fits within the way that we want to run our business, the way we want to run our life, and just take some snippets. You know, it is about doing it our way, not about doing it alone. You know, I feel very passionate that people feel connected, and I think when we work within a community, even if it's a community that we don't necessarily recognise as having an obvious fit in its first instance, maybe to the sector in which we work, there are so many opportunities to link with the right resources and the right people if we're able to articulate the challenge and need that we have. And I mentioned earlier that I was going to share, there were sort of two things that happened this week. One was talking to the entrepreneur that genuinely felt everything he did, he needed to sort of do in isolation and find his own way. The second thing that happened is that I went to a workshop on Wednesday. And this workshop was being hosted by Creative England. I don't know whether you've heard of Creative England, but they're an organisation that's there to encourage creative businesses outside of London. In particular, it's resourced to do that, and I've worked with them previously. But the workshop was about social media, how to get your brand out there from a social media point of view, and then about podcasting. And I had reasonably high expectations of this workshop because there were two individuals that I'd heard of before. So the person that was speaking on social media, he's a micro influencer, and his handle on social media is Mr. A Singh. And then there was the person that was talking about podcasting. She's ex-BBC and she's called Claire Freeman. So I knew the quality of what they were going to be talking about was going to be good. But what was fascinating, and it was really refreshing because I'm not sure that we see enough of this on social media, both of them took us through their formula, and I use the word formula really loosely. It's probably more accurate to say they took us through their journey to date. So they talked about what inspired them to be more active on in the fields that they are. You know, their sort of their story, what they wanted to share. Mr. A Singh talked, for example, about and I could definitely relate to this. So he talks on social media about three aspects. One, his home city and community, which is Birmingham, which he's very passionate about. The second thing about his work, and he's done a lot around marketing and branding in very impressive prestigious businesses like Apple, and lots of organisations that he can't even talk about some of the work that he's done. And then his and that's now developed into he does the sort of the social media strategy as a full-time business, and he's an artist. And then he talks about sharing his passion, and his passion, I suppose there's two aspects to his passion, which sort of overlaps with community. His passion is him as an artist, but the second thing is the work that he does around social impact. So hence why it's very closely aligned to community. So those are areas that he shares on social media. And he talked about the way that he'd built up his activity, and he wasn't driven by how many likes he could get. He was driven about putting out really great content. So this was about him sharing his story, sharing what he did, and reaching a wider audience. And then Claire was talking about how she'd been fascinated with audio since a very young child. You know, there's recordings back in the 80s of her, you know, her and her brother talking into microphones which her dad had recorded. So audio had always been a big thing. The way that you can tell stories over audio is really powerful and continues to be really powerful. And so she'd been telling her story about that, and she told us some really great practical tips about everything from I've got an idea to a podcast to actually making it a reality. So very, very stepwise. But both of them made the point throughout their talk, this is how I did it. However, at these various points, you need to think about how they are meaningful or congruent with your own business. So they absolutely reiterated, we're not giving you a formula. We're explaining our story, we're telling you the things that you need to think about, but then you need to do it your way. And I was just so pleased, and it was so refreshing to hear that. So they did give you the 1 to 10 of the elements that made up a good sort of social media campaign, the elements that made your podcast successful. But it was up to us in the audience then to go away and think about each of the stages, and not to just do the thing they told us to do, but it was to think about how would we approach it from our perspective, making sure that it was authentic and congruent with the way that we want to show up, whether that's personally or in our business. So it was very inspiring to have that reference this week, particularly when I've certainly been going through this reflection on the importance of doing things our way, but having this appreciation, there are loads of people out there that we can learn from, so it isn't about doing it alone. So I think it's probably fair to say that my title of this Facebook Live was a little bit sneaky, because it isn't about doing it our way versus doing it alone. It's about doing it our way, but not doing it alone. One of the reasons, and you've heard me say this so many times, that I started my own business was because I feel very, very passionate about creating effective collaborations. I want to work with people that want to be impactful and they want to make a difference in the world. They know where they want to get to, and I want to help them get there quicker. And the way I do that is to put them in touch with the right people, put them in touch with the right resources, create great collaborations and win-wins, and we all get there. It's absolutely about having a sense of community. So that's where I'm going to leave tonight's Facebook Live. I will have a look at, I know there have been a couple of comments coming through. That's always the tricky thing when I'm doing these lives on my own and I don't have a sidekick that can help go through the comments. I'm going to put in the comments the Facebook group for business founders. We see you. This is all about connection, community. It's all about creating opportunities with each other. It's all about learning from each other, sharing our challenges, getting stuff done. Please do join us if you'd like to do that. And I'll also put some links to the couple of workshops that I mentioned. And if I can, and I haven't looked, so I don't know whether Eliza Manningham Bower has actually got much presence on online in terms of any of her storytelling. I've got a feeling there might be a biography out there. It's not something I've read, but yeah, any resources that I think are relevant, I will pop in the comments. And I look forward to getting back into the rhythm of Facebook Lives. I'm going to do a mixture of things actually, so just to, before I sign off, just to say, I'll be doing my regular Facebook Lives. I'm going to be doing more ad hoc ones at different times of the day, which will incorporate interviews with, well actually I'm not going to, this is what I'm not going to do, I'm not going to interview people per se. It's going to be a conversation with. It's going to be much more conversational, my approach. And coming soon, having done the workshop earlier in the week, I'm also thinking about how to tackle some of my information sharing and experience sharing with others in an audio form. So I'm going to probably, once I've got my head around it, launch a podcast as well. So those are all the things that are in the pipeline. So I'll continue to post updates on this page, continue to post things in the group. If anyone has any comments or queries that they're not comfortable with maybe sharing sort of openly on the page, please do send me a direct message. I'm always happy to receive those. And it's Friday and the weekend is now here. So everybody have a great weekend and I will speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.